And now to the conversation of the day. Emerging technologies such as artificial intelligence, what is commonly known as the AI, blockchain and non-fungible tokens, the Internet of Things, augmented reality, virtual reality, mixed reality, extended reality, robotics, 3D printing, name them, all have greatly impacted education. And while these technologies are commonly used in informal learning, the application in formal education remains underexplored. Now to speak on emerging trends in global education, implications for economic transformation, and sustainable development in Nigeria is a renowned development economist, is Dr. Tosin Oluwashola. You're welcome to Business Express.
Thank you for having
Did
me.
I say Oluwashola? Is Olushola? Pardon me. Okay, Doctor, we just saw the president yesterday deliver the 2025 budget of 47.9 trillion. Call it a 50 trillion naira budget, and you won't be wrong. This is huge. This is phenomenal. And education, what we are talking about today, is about received about the second highest allocation in terms of a monetary allocation to this ministry. Today we're talking about all sorts to do with AI and all of that. What's your take? What should we be looking at with such a huge budgetary allocation to education, and the world is going tech, going artificial intelligence? What should we expect, particularly from your own constituency of academics?
All right, thank you very much. I think the budget, I've heard, analysts say this budget is ambitious. The president himself, said on the floor of the National Assembly that this is an ambitious budget. But then if you convert this nearly 50 trillion naira budget into dollars, you have less than 30 billion dollar budget. So it is intrinsically not necessarily ambitious in that context for a population of close to 200 million. However, the budget itself is a proposed budget, so basically the devil is in the detail. But then, if you check national budgets, they are supposed to serve two fundamental purposes. One of it is to signal the strategic direction of government in terms of her priorities. And for this particular budget, of course, the government has prioritized defense. It has prioritized human capital development and infrastructural development. And those three, for me, are very profound and fundamental for national development, especially considering the fact that, like I mentioned earlier, this $30 billion budget may not necessarily, take us to the promised land, but it can serve as a catalyst to stimulate investment in all of the necessary direction, especially private sector investment that will be necessary to drive the transformative process in the economy. So to that extent, I think security is very critical for private sector investments because this will also have a spillover effect, not just in education, but also in agriculture, in industry, and other critical sectors of the economy. And then secondly, looking at the direction of human capital development, I think in terms of direction, this is also a positive direction that government is prioritizing investment in human capital development with specific references to education as well as the health sector. However, it is important to sound a note of caution in this context because the level of implementation of the budget would determine whether this direction will be achieved and if this budget will actually translate into improvement in the well-being of Nigerians. This remains to be seen. Like I said, the devil is in the detail, and the level of implementation of the finally approved budget will determine whether this will be for us something to celebrate or something that we also would probably look at in a years from now and be looking at how well it has performed or not performed. Thank you.
Okay, while we're keeping positive as to the implementation of the budget as it were come 2025, let's look at education as it were. Yes, but we have special funding, particularly for projects. And most times academics will tell you research and development is key. The need to marry the gown and the town is very important. Now we have a lot of reforms around digital technology. What's your take? Where should we be going into? Some of those special interventions, where should they be put?
Yeah, thank you very much. For me, I think it is important to take into account the emerging trends in education, especially global trends. And this is very profound because, in biblical context, it is said that if you seek first the kingdom of God, every other thing will be added. In a national context, if you get your education structure and your education strategy and your human capital development framework correctly, every other sector of the economy will certainly just thrive. Of course, it is not just enough to allocate budgets, higher budgets to education, because you have all sorts of agencies under the Ministry of Education, ranging from Universal Basic Education to TET Fund, and every other agency. But then the world is looking in the direction of skills. Like you mentioned, when you talk about town and gown, for us, it's a major point of intervention is required in the Nigerian education sector to bridge the gap, the very obvious gap when it comes to the level of skills acquired in our educational system and training program vis-a-vis the need of the industry. Obviously, there's a mismatch at this point, and that will translate into high level of graduate unemployment. You see people, we churn out graduates year in, year out, in their hundreds of thousands. The NYSC, has more than 10 streams in a particular year, telling you how much, the higher educational institutions are churning out graduates. However, these graduates, end up on the street, some of them as Uber driver, Bolt driver, some of them, doing things that have no bearing at all to what they have been trained to do in their educational institutions. And that is a signal for us to know that something is fundamentally wrong in the structure of our educational system. We need to deliberately, find a system that helps us align our skills from the universities, from the higher educational development institutions with the need of the industry. And those needs are not rocket science. Essentially, we are a growing economy with a very large population requiring food, requiring clothing, requiring shelter, requiring transportation and energy. These are critical sectors. How much of that, are we able to provide? How many centers of excellence do we have in Nigeria in terms of institution that we can record as, the go-to place when it comes to sustainable energy in Nigeria, or the go-to places? Yes, we have a lot of universities of agriculture, and all sorts of programs, and people graduate, in those programs. But then how much of those capacity building programs have translated into direct impact in the agricultural sector, in agro-processing, or across the entire agri value chain? So, and of course, we're talking about robotics, AI. I think before we even go to, those very sophisticated emerging skill sets that are of global relevance, it is also very important that we do two things. We tailor our education skills to meet the need of Nigeria at this current time. And then look at global opportunities that we can also leverage. We have this huge, youth population, very smart, very brilliant people, but we're unable to leverage what you can call a demographic dividend as a country because we are yet, to form that alignment, proper alignment between the skills acquired in schools and the need of the society. Thank you.
Dr. Olushola, whether homegrown technology or the imported technology or the mix of both, you've clearly said it, there is the issue of a skills gap that needs to be bridged. This conversation has been ongoing for quite a while now. What are we doing that we're not doing correctly? We see technologies commonly used in the informal learning sector not really being applied in the formal setting. Is it a rejig of our curriculum? Is it about the demand? Is the demand out there not enough for us to be driven enough to want to meet this demand and to have productivity the much that we should? What's that missing link that you think should be closed and practically?
All right, thank you very much. I think this is very profound. To begin to evaluate our curriculum is basically talking about looking at the heart, of the subject matter, because sincerely, you cannot build a superstructure on a very faulty foundation. Of course, the curriculum we have inherited from the colonial system is supposed to create administrative staff and people to fit into an existing framework, of job system that meets, the interest of our colonial masters at the time. But 50 years down the line, we have yet to transition, and build a curriculum that speaks specifically to our need as a society and the need of the industries within their own context here. And going specifically to your question around, the tools that we use or the inconsistency or the gap between theory and practice. I'll give you an instance. There's a lot of misplaced emphasis these days on the idea that you are only qualified as an educated person if you have a certificate, or some kind of degree, a BSc, an MSc, a PhD.
A PhD, professor.
That's the idea. And more disturbing is the idea that parents also think that the things that have worked for them, are suddenly by default going to work for their own children in their own environment in this system that we live in. And unfortunately, that is not going to be the case. The idea that everybody must study accounting, law, engineering, estate survey, and all of those, in quotes, very fancy.
We have artificial intelligence taking over
those courses.
All of those spaces.
Yeah, so the idea, parents are still, interacting with parents. I work in the university. Parents still insist. They still determine choice of courses for their students, for their children, and they insist that they must do accounting, they must study economics, they must do business administration and all of those. Now, the difference here is that what are the needs of society? Of course, I don't need to acquire a BSc photography or videography to do proper video editing and be, of value to somebody who runs a media enterprise. I really sincerely don't need a degree in agriculture, to be able to plug into one of the part of the agri value chain and add value and produce, the need of society at that
on
point.
The highway.
So,
Dr. Olushola, there is so much to say, but permit me, I think we're going to have a second cut to this. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us at this time.
Thank you so much for having me.